October winds howled through Oslo's streets, carrying dry leaves that danced under the glow of lampposts. At Grünerløkka High School, Maria Hansen, 42, closed her laptop in the teacher's lounge, the screen's glare reflecting the exhaustion in her eyes. A Norwegian language teacher, she graded papers and planned lessons, but her real work was invisible. Seeing her students, especially those the world seemed to overlook. Maria had grown up in Drammen, the daughter of a bus driver and a cleaner. As a child, she was the girl in patched clothes, devouring second-hand books while others mocked her. Now, in her classroom, she saw mirrors of herself. Teenagers with fragile dreams, many immigrants or children of immigrants, struggling to find a place in a Norway that, though welcoming, didn't always see them. Amina, a 16-year-old Somali, and Yusuf, a 15-year-old Syrian, were the quietest, their gazes heavy with stories no one asked to hear. That morning, the classroom was oddly silent. Amina, in her blue hijab, kept her head down, fingers gripping the edge of her desk. Yusuf scribbled in his notebook, avoiding his peers. Maria felt a pang in her chest. After class, she pulled Amina aside in the hallway. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice gentle. Amina hesitated. "They laugh at me," she whispered. "My accent. My clothes. They say I don't belong." Maria swallowed hard. "Who?" Amina shook her head, eyes welling. "They always do." That night, in her modest Toyen apartment, Maria couldn't sleep. Amina's words echoed, mingling with memories of her own youth, the cruel laughter, the urge to vanish. She'd thought Oslo, with its promise of equality, would be different. But Norway, with 20% of its population immigrants or their descendants, still had shadows. Bullying wasn't just childish, it reflected deeper divisions. Maria resolved that her classroom would be a shield. The next week, she launched a project, Stories That Shape Us. Each student would write and present an oral story about their life, family, or culture. "Words have power," she said, looking at Amina and Yusuf. "They can hurt, but they can also build." The idea was to give voice to the silenced, to forge bonds where there was distance. She imagined students understanding, perhaps even respecting, one another. The initial reaction was mixed. Sophie, a 16-year-old Norwegian, rolled her eyes, calling the project boring. Yusuf was blunt. "Why tell my story? No one cares." Maria smiled. "I care. And others will too." Amina, shy, merely nodded. Over the weeks, Maria guided them. Amina wrote about her grandmother in Mogadishu, telling tales under a starry sky. Yusuf described nights in Damascus, his mother singing to drown out the sound of bombs. Even Sophie opened up, sharing her grandfather's life as a fjord sailor. Maria recorded the presentations with an old phone, editing them at night for a video to show at the parent meeting. She dreamed of applause, of families united by pride. But Oslo's wind seemed to carry more than cold, it brought resistance. An email arrived, sharp as winter air. Ingrid, mother of a quiet student named Marcus, wrote, "I don't see why we're focusing on immigrant stories. The school should teach Norwegian, not foreign cultures." Maria froze. She replied carefully, explaining that the project celebrated all voices, but the criticism weighed on her. Ingrid wasn't alone. Whispers spread. Parents muttered about wrong priorities, about indoctrination. At the parent meeting, the packed room buzzed with tension. Maria played the video, clips of the stories, set against Oslo's snowy parks, wet streets, and trams. Amina spoke with shy strength. Yusuf, with a restrained anger that hushed the crowd. When the lights came up, some parents clapped. Others, like Ingrid, crossed their arms. "This is politics," Ingrid snapped, standing. "My kids came to learn, not hear about distant wars." Bjorn, another parent, nodded. "Norway has its own culture. Why these stories?" Maria's face burned. She glanced at Amina, at the back with her parents, eyes down. Yusuf gripped the back of a chair. These kids are Norway, Maria said, her voice steady but trembling. They live here, dream here. Their stories are ours. The principal, Mr. Larson, called for calm, promising to review the project. After the meeting, Amina approached Maria, tears streaming. I don't want to go on, she said. They hate me. Maria held her shoulders. They don't know you. But they will. That night, Maria pored over her notes, her apartment smelling of cold coffee. The project teetered on the edge. Larson suggested softening the focus, avoiding sensitive topics. Maria refused. She remembered her mother, cleaning offices at night yet reading her bedtime stories. You're stronger than you think, she'd said. Maria decided to go further. The project would culminate in a public event, with students presenting to Grünerløkka's community. She spent tireless weeks organizing. She invited families, an integration NGO, a local newspaper. She rented an auditorium at the cultural center, paying out of pocket. The students, once hesitant, began to shine. Sophie helped Amina rehearse, patiently correcting her accent. Yusuf wrote a new story about arriving in Oslo, when snow made him feel he could start over. The classroom transformed, silences gave way to laughter, scattered desks formed circles. But resistance grew. Ingrid and other parents sent a petition to the school board, demanding the project's end. It's not inclusive, they wrote, ironically. It excludes Norwegian kids. Maria read it with a sinking heart. Quitting would be easier, save her job, avoid gossip. But she thought of Amina, Yusuf, herself at 12, longing to be heard. The event arrived under a gray sky, light snowflakes falling. The auditorium, adorned with lanterns and Norwegian flags, was full. Maria adjusted the microphone, stomach churning. Ingrid and Bjorn sat in the audience, faces stern. Backstage, Amina trembled, her blue hijab glowing under the lights. Yusuf clutched his notes, muttering his lines. Maria opened simply. Today, you'll hear stories. They're not just words, they're lives. The students took the stage, one by one. Sophie spoke of her grandfather, her voice ringing with pride. Marcus, Ingrid's son, surprised everyone with his great-grandmother's tale, a war resistor, drawing gasps. Amina, faltering, shared nights in Mogadishu, and the audience's silence felt sacred. Yusuf closed, describing Oslo's snow as a blanket that hides, but also holds. His voice cracked on the final line, and the auditorium erupted in applause. Even Ingrid, reluctantly, clapped. Afterward, parents approached. A Norwegian mother hugged Amina. Your story reminded me of my grandmother. Yusuf, surrounded by peers, smiled, his notebook forgotten. A local reporter scribbled furiously. The days that followed brought subtle shifts. The petition fizzled, and Larson, pressed by media, announced the project would be annual. Amina smiled again in class, her notebook full of new stories. Yusuf, once withdrawn, now chatted with Sophie at break. But not everything was perfect. Ingrid never apologized, and murmurs of discontent lingered. Maria knew prejudice didn't vanish with one event. A month later, the newspaper ran Oslo's Young Voices, which went viral online. The school won a grant for inclusion projects, and Maria got emails from students. Amina wrote, "Thank you, teacher. I feel at home." Yusuf left a note on her desk. Now I know my story matters. Maria walked through Grünerløkka one November morning, the cold air biting her face. She passed a new mural, painted by students, colorful hands holding stars, with the words, "Our stories, our home." She stopped, her heart warm despite the winter. She thought of her mother, Amina, Yusuf. Words, she knew, could be a burden, but also a bridge. And in Oslo, under the falling snow, Maria felt she'd built something that would last. Final reflection. The weight of words isn't just about a teacher or her students. It's about what happens when someone chooses to listen where others silence. In Norway, where equality is a pride, there are still muffled voices, of immigrants, youth, those seeking a home. But a shared story, a space to speak, can change everything. Sometimes, the greatest act of courage is simply opening your ears.